to the Metapod podcast, Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta in full force once again. Sean, Jake, back on the desk in full swing. Been a couple weeks since we've been in full swing. Yep. Sean, hopefully, did you say earlier before the pod that you were been feeling a little ill?
Yeah, I'm sick today, but you know,
gosh,
it's not so bad, but it's yeah.
Just being sick in general is not fun.
Yeah.
Like I feel that. Man, I like finally pretty much took the day off today.
Nice.
And I played Overwatch today. That's pretty much what I did.
I think I saw your tweet about trying to tank. It was.
Yeah. No, well, not tank as in like do bad. Like I was playing the role. Yeah, I was playing the role of tank for anyone who doesn't know in Overwatch.
Who's your tank?
I've been really liking Roadhog.
Oh,
lately.
Interesting. Okay.
I just like hooking the people, bringing them in, and just pop.
I was a Diva main.
I like Diva a lot too, but
Diva's
I don't know. I've been having a lot of fun with Roadhog lately.
Fair enough. Now everyone listening is like, oh wait.
It was just a weekly challenge, and I had to play tank, and it took like 2 hours to win one game, and I was getting mad. Anyways, we've got some things to talk about today. Not only for the competitive people in the room, there were 3 regionals that we're going to go over today. So that's going to be a majority of the cast. But for all you collectors out there as well, there's been some new news, some new of that new news in the Pokemon trading card game about future sets. Now, if you really, really want some incredible news, just look up the pictures of V-Star Universe, because, oh my God, those cards are going to be gorgeous, and we cannot wait for Crown Zenith. Because I think we're pretty sure they're going in Crown Zenith, right? Do we know that for sure?
Well, I mean, we can't know. There probably will be a few cards left out because the Western world likes to hold back a few options for, like, you know, boxes and things like that later on. But I would say 90%, 90 to 95% of them.
But either way, we've got you covered as soon as they come down. But before we get into anything, as almost always, pretty much always, we got to do the 5-star review, Sean. This one is from Silly Seth. It is labeled as pretty cool. Just found out this podcast, and it's so cool. So as in, like, it's got like 5 O's in it. So cool. I love Pokemon TCG, and I've been missing out on the meta, so this is amazing. Well, Silly Seth, we keep you informed around here, so we appreciate your support.
Yeah, and we're going to keep you informed on the meta today, too, because boy howdy.
Boy howdy, there's a lot of meta today, and there's a lot to talk about with the meta. But if you want to leave a review for yourself, I think somebody recently DM'd us on Twitter asking about leaving a review. If you want to leave a review, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, make sure to go to our page, Metapod page, hit whatever rating you think we deserve, and then type out what you want. If you're on YouTube, just leave a nice comment. Spotify, you can't leave a review, but you can rate us a certain amount of stars. So whatever platform you're on, make sure to give us your good words or bad words too, if you don't like this podcast, which is completely understandable.
I mean, Jake, before we get into it, I just want to point out that I had a banger of a tweet this weekend.
You did? Yeah, you did have a banger of a tweet this week. That's right. So most of the time it's me tweeting on our Twitter, just random things that pop up. But Sean, you had an incredible tweet. I think it's like over 200. I think it's like almost 300 likes or something like that. Either way, it's absolute banger.
Yeah. If you don't know, go to our Twitter if you want to see a cute cat. That is my cat, Maple. And you know, I was watching one of the regionals this weekend. I think that one was
we're doing our studying, right?
We're doing our due diligence, and my cat was just, you know, had a discerning palate for Intellion engines, and was trying to help. You know, like, oh, you need to scoop up this one and put this one down, and
then
great.
You need to shady dealings for this, that, and the other, and that it was adorable to watch. And I watched it at least 30 times because every time we got a notification, you bet I opened it up. So it was just super good alongside many of the other great things that were in the Pokemon trading card game. this past week. But Sean,
Yes.
let's talk about the new, as I was mentioning earlier, the new trademarks that were filed in the Pokemon trading card game, Snow Hazard and Clay Burst. Sean, they've been filed by Pokemon. They're under the same set of like name trademarks as in the past. You know, we've seen these double sets now coming out in Japan. We assume that this is pretty much the same thing.
Yep. This is if you think all the way back to the good old days of base set Sword and Shield, right? The first two sets we're going to be getting in in Japan, and then it will be bundled together in a single set for America and Europe and everywhere else. There's going to be Scarlet, and there's probably going to be a base set Violet. No, I don't know if they've actually announced that officially yet, but like basically that's what it's going to be.
We assume that these are going to be coming out sometime between
February.
April and or I'm sorry, what?
Well, so I'm saying like the first sets will be coming out in February.
Oh yeah. I'm
US.
sorry. I was talking about these coming out in April and June. Yes.
Yes.
The Snow Hazard and Clay Burst.
Yep, and this will be like that second set, if you will, which in America was Chilling Rain, but in Japan it was the like Ice Rider and Shadow Rider dual set. So, you know, Pokemon is very predictable, so they're picking two of their legendaries
if it ain't broke, don't fix it, as they say.
Yeah.
Except when it comes to the Pokemon trading card game live. But anyways,
Yep.
This is probably going to be about the two kind of legendaries or Treasures of Ruins legendaries. If you played Scarlet and Violet yet, if you have not, just skip about 1 minute in this podcast so then you don't get spoiled or anything. But it'll be more than likely what is assumed. Qin Pao and Ting Lu are the Treasures of Ruins legendaries. I honestly haven't made it this far in the game yet, so this is news to me, Sean.
I mean, you just got to do one of those glitches, right? Just glitch your way up the side of a cliff by running backwards on Miraidon, and then you can get there instantly, right?
They've patched the game to it, so I don't know if you can still do that. And also, I don't know if I'm coordinated enough to try to do that. But I do understand what you mean.
Yeah,
and,
you're like, oh yeah, no, okay, yeah.
Hopefully, if you've been playing the new games, you've been enjoying them. I've heard plenty of good things about them. I know some people have not been having some fun, but if you just look at it from like, the Pokemon experience.
I mean, I will say, people said it's some of the best Pokemon storyline games in generations in a long time.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's a lot of new things alongside it, but we're not the video game podcast, right? We're the trading card game podcast. And let me tell you, there were some new games that released recently, but there was also some new decks that came around in these three regionals. We're going to talk about Brisbane, we're going to talk about Stuttgart, and we're going to talk about Toronto regionals. So let's talk about Brisbane first, Sean. Tim Franklin.
Well, I was going to say, Jake, before we go into this, I mean, you know the answer, but what was the deck that we thought was going to be just like top of the pops, if you will, at all of the regionals? Just set the stage. Set the stage for our listeners. Yes.
Because it dominated LAIC?
Because it is an insane deck. Let's be frank. It was because I know you weren't able to join me last week for the pod, but just to set the stage, Lugia was 25% of day 1, 55% of day 2, and 75% of top 8 meta share.
Which is a lot.
It's insane. And I will say, I'm going to also preface this by, for Toronto at least, the meta share for Lugia for day 1 was 34%.
That's even higher than it was at LAIC, yeah.
So I want all the listeners to have that in the back of their mind when they look at all of the top 8 for these three regionals. Jake, kick us off.
We're going to talk about Brisbane first. Tim Franklin ends up winning it, the Australian. Well, I mean, most all the players were from Australia in this because, well, it's their place, it's their regional, and the winning deck, you may not even know what this is. It is Inteleon Frostmoth. You probably have not seen this before. I certainly have not. I did see, I think, like one person play this in Toronto that actually did really, really well, like top 100, which is an accomplishment when you have over 1,000 players. There were 182 players over in the Brisbane regionals. Pretty good size, I think, actually, for an Australian regional, especially with multiple events going on at the same time. Sean, this uses our favorite Shady Dealings engine and also the Ice Dance Frostmoth engine, accelerating water energy to benched Pokemon. But there are some other cards in here that you may not have guessed, Sean. Let's talk about the V-Star first, because the other one we're going to be talking about in a bunch of other decks, because it was kind of the super surprise of the weekend. But Sean, can you remind me, because gosh, I don't know, I bulk this card. What does Alolan Vulpix V-Star do?
Well, it is the weakest of all the V-Stars at 240 HP, but that don't matter.
The squishiest.
The squishiest, right.
Yes,
but
not the weakest.
I would say it's got 2 attacks. I did not get to watch any of this, so I don't know, honestly, like, the main purpose of this. But the first attack, water, 2 colorless. Snow Mirage does 160. But importantly, the attack's damage isn't affected by effects on your opponent's active, so gets through Miltank. And secondly, during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from Pokemon that have an ability. So what Pokemon have abilities, Jake? Almost all of them.
Yeah, they're a lot of them. I was gonna say Duraludon, but Duraludon has an attack that goes through.
Yes, so its shred attack would go through.
Yeah, so that doesn't work. But there are a lot of Pokemon that have abilities in the Pokemon trading card game, and especially Lugia is the big one. I mean, that's got the whole V-Star power. Palkia does as well, and a bunch of other Pokemon as well, especially like Lost Box stuff like Cramorant, Charizard. So Snow Mirage, pretty good attack. Not only do you go through things, but you also prevent things. And then the V-Star power, no energy cost on there. It does 70 times Silvery Snow Star. This attack does 70 damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon V in play. So against Mew VMAX, whoo, that's a lot of damage.
Yeah, that's real good against Mew VMAX. So
considering it's free, a free attack.
So like it's a 1/1 line of the Alolan Vulpix. So you've got one free. You basically got 1 0 energy attack on a Mew VMAX that can get through. But also for the Mew VMAX matchup, because I thought about this. I was like, what else would be, could you do against Mew VMAX? Because really, I don't think the deck is meant for that. And it's 1 Drapion V.
I mean, Drapion it does prove to help out your Mew matchup considerably. It doesn't make it an auto win, but it gives you such a good swing with the Drapion when you don't start it at the beginning of the game, because it just literally attacks for free and it just does a one-hit KO. Mew struggles to counter that. They have to play Path or something like that. So very, very interesting, I will say. There's one more card, actually 2 more cards, I will say, that people didn't really know about before this weekend. I would say most people. One of them is Emergency Jelly. Sean, there are 2 in this list. The Emergency Jelly. What is this card?
It is an interesting Pokemon tool. At the end of each turn, yours, your opponent's, doesn't matter actually. If the Pokemon this card is attached to has 30 HP or less remaining, and it has any damage counters on it, so it can't be, I guess, a 30 HP Pokemon.
Are there standard like 30 or under HP Pokemon?
I'm sure there might be one somewhere.
I don't even know. But anyways,
heal 120 damage from it. If you healed any damage this way, discard the tool. So it's like a nice little way to like boost up, some of the healing potential. I think it gets rid of a lot of that Sableye damage as well. That could be built up over time. So,
especially with Cramorant hitting a number like 110, right? That can, especially when you're a single prize primarily deck. Ice-Cube's got 120. The Inteleons have 160 to 150. Greninja's got 130. You can really kind of put away that that damage. So then the Sableye has to guarantee to, like, they have to have the exact amount to be able to knock you out. But this Pokemon, or this tool card, I should say, is primarily used for one Pokemon, Sean, and it is Articuno from Silver Tempest. I'm going to be honest, I completely bulked this card. I don't think we talked about it on this podcast. But, Sean, this is a 110 HP basic water Pokemon card. It's got 2 attacks. The first one, a water energy, single water energy, Ice Wing for 20 damage. Nah, don't worry about it. The second attack is what you want to make note of. 2 water energies is the cost. Wild Freeze for 70 damage. This Pokemon also does 50 damage to itself. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. Now, with the Emergency Jelly and this Pokemon having 110 HP, the idea of this Articuno is to trap something in the active, like a Lugia or something like that, and to Wild Freeze it a couple times. You'll do 50 damage to yourself twice, putting 140 on your opponent. They'll be paralyzed. They can't move. And then your Emergency Jelly activates when you have 10 HP left. You fully heal, and then you can do it 2 more times, doing 280 total and knocking out a Lugia V-Star and your Articuno still has 10 HP left. So you're basically trading. Yeah. In 4 turns, I mean, it takes 4 turns to make a knockout, but when Lugia lists and a lot of other lists right now aren't playing switch cards, depending on free retreat or manual retreat, this Articuno got real scary over the weekend.
That's a really good point. I think when you see this attack, I think at first glance, it's very underwhelming. To your point about like a bulk card, right? Like 2 water, okay, well, it would have been better if it was 2 colorless, but it's not. Yeah. 70 damage is super weak. The fact that you do 50 damage to yourself means like you can't really keep going with this forever. But the reality is you can. Between Scoop Up Net and the because you have Frostmoth too, right? So between Scoop Up Net and the Emergency Jelly, if nobody's playing switching cards, you could basically just get free knockouts. It just takes a few turns.
Exactly.
So that is pretty wild. I think I'll be interested to see how many people bring certain switching cards back, like escape ropes even. Just to have 1 or 2 of these to counter this. Just
to get things out of the active so then it's not stuck, because this wasn't the only deck that played this Articuno, and I imagine bunches of other water decks as well will play that card. There's no Melanie in this because Melanie doesn't really work with anything other than Alolan Vulpix and Drapion, if that was your first thought. Again, you're using the Frostmoth to be able to accelerate the energy. He's got 2 Nessas in this list. Yeah. Nessa won a regional. I'm super happy about that. Interesting, 1 battle VIP pass. That card is so good. You just need 1 of them in there, right? There could have been any other card that a 4th Scoop Up Net, another Quick Ball, another Evo Incense, right? Another Emergency Jelly. Jake, and you're like, battle VIP pass.
I guess the reason for it. You have 4 Irida. So if you can get turn 1 going second.
Exactly.
You play the Irida, you go get 1 of your water Pokemon, you battle VIP pass for 2 more of your water Pokemon. All of a sudden, you're like, this Inteleon engine. So I think that's a really smart because you have a way to search it.
The same concept as when Palkia first started, right? I mean, Palkia was so good, and that was the method of its madness. Irida turn 1, battle VIP pass setup. Yeah. And that was playing a lot more battle VIP pass though. So, but yeah, it's just an insane cool list in my opinion, and something that I would have never thought would have happened, especially like the second place list as well, Sean. That was by Joel Suryadi from Indonesia. Hopefully I said their name correctly. This was another 1 prize deck primarily. It's Flaffy Box. We've seen Flaffy Box in previous regionals, but a bunch of like 2 prizers with the Raichu and things like that. But this is taking the Regieleki from the Regigigas decks, the Zekrom, right? And a couple other options in here. So, Sean, your concept of this is the Dynamotor, one of your big attackers, this Zekrom. If you don't know what it is, I think it's popular in GLC Lightning decks, Gym Leader Challenge format singleton decks. This is a basic 130 HP Lightning Pokemon. Its second attack is what you want. 2 lightning and a colorless is the cost, 130 damage. This Pokemon also does 60 damage to itself. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. So Sean, bringing back the paralysis yet again.
This is a wild card because you think about how good Articuno might be, right, Jake? In especially that Lugia matchup. Well, what if I told you could do that, but also hit for weakness?
And you know what? You can also, you may be thinking, oh, Jake, that's Sean, that's 260, right? On the weakness of Lugia. Well, you've got other options in here. One of the options is this Medicham, right? You hit the 260. They have 20 HP left. You Dynamotor onto a Medicham V, the Rapid Strike Medicham V, and you Yoga Loop. You put 2 damage counters on the Lugia, and then all of a sudden you get another turn after that to do whatever you want. But that, Sean, is not the only option to one-hit KO with the Zekrom, because you have this Zapdos in here from the Pokemon Go set. We've talked about the Zapdos Articuno Moltres before. It hasn't really seen action, except I think this is the best performance it's had of the trio. This Zapdos, it's a basic Pokemon, has an ability. Your basic lightning Pokemon's attacks, except Zapdos, do 10 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. When you're hitting into weakness, that's 20 extra damage, pushing the Zekrom to 280 and a one-hit KO. You've also got the Raikou V in there, right, with the Lightning Rondo, just like the Suicune, but I mean, you're hitting for weakness, so it works out in there.
And then what does Regieleki do?
Regieleki, this is one of the 2 Regieleki cards. This one specifically, the Terraspark Regieleki, 120 HP basic lightning Pokemon. Terraspark does 120 damage for 2 lightning and a colorless. You discard all lightning energy from the Pokemon. It also does 40 damage to 20 of your opponent. 40 damage to 20 different Pokemon on the field. 40 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So with the Regieleki, you can do a little bit of setup damage if you've got kind of a smaller Pokemon in the active, especially when you're talking about something like Lost Box, right? You can do a little bit of spread damage in certain places. So very, very cool list, especially with the consistency, you know, of getting out the Flaffies. You've got some Stormy Mountains in here, a bunch of Ball Search cards and Level Balls, Ultra Balls, and Quick Balls. You know, Radiant Greninja concealed cards along with a Crobat in there and Research. So very cool. Surprisingly, only 2 speed energy, in my opinion. I know you can't Dynamotor the speed energy, right? But I don't know, just drawing 2 cards seems really good when you're attaching an energy. So, I mean, they obviously know more than me, but I mean, they just got second at a regional.
I will say it's interesting though, Jake, to see. Yeah, you have 4 Research and 2 Marnie, but did you see the split between Serena and Boss here?
This doesn't surprise me too much because Serena, right? Most of the decks are playing Pokemon V, and especially when you're a lightning single prize deck like this, you probably are almost always gusting up a V, whether that's Lumineon, because Lumineon is seeing a rise in popularity, or like a Lugia, because Lugia is literally 50% of the room in all these regionals. If you don't remember what Serena is, because it is a newer card in Silver Tempest, Serena is a supporter. You get to choose one of 2 options. One, discard up, or well, the one that we're talking about primarily is switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon V with their active Pokemon. So it's a gust effect. But the other option, which is why I think it's almost more valuable right now than Boss's orders, is the other option is discard up to 3 cards from your hand. You must discard at least 1 card. If you do, draw cards until you have 5 in your hand. So it is effectively also a draw supporter, just depending on what you need. So that in my opinion is why Serena is better than Boss's Orders at this point in the current format.
I like it because
decks.
It's interesting because especially with like Lugia and this Flaffy deck, you want to with Flaffy be getting lightning energy in the discard, and you want to obviously with Lugia be getting those Archeops in the discard. So it's interesting to see like the synergy that they've sort of created with this, 2-function supporter.
It's just really, really cool that, because like Boss is like, it has this effect, and then that's pretty much it though. But I love the options of like the choices. That's why I thought also the, what were they? The tag teams were really cool.
Yes.
Because the tag teams, you had multiple options almost with them, just depending on, using your GX move, whatever. Or
you could you had different options based on like what you wanted to do, whether you wanted to discard or do another thing.
And I love seeing one prize crazy decks pop up. But there was another one, Sean, that we can talk about in this one. This one, Anthony Fernie from Australia getting 3rd place in Brisbane with Durant. Sean, the mill.
God.
Durant. I can't believe this deck got 3rd place at a regional, but super, super sweet. Durant, if you do not know, 90 HP grass basic Pokemon, has a double colorless attack called Devour. For each Durant you haven't played, discard the top card of your opponent's deck, so you can discard up to 4 cards every single turn. With this attack, you have other Pokemon in here like the Yveltal, Cry of Destruction, which we have seen time and time again, discarding a bunch of special energies because special energies are littering the format with Lugia. You've got the Pyukumuku, pitch a Pyukumuku. You may have seen our tweet the other week about the crime of Pyukumuku going in the Lost Zone. I still think that's a crime against humanity. But there's 2 other cards in here as well. One of them is Cast Form. Sean.
Yep.
Cast Form. Don't worry about it. It's literally just a free retreater.
That's it. That's the only point.
That's really the only thing you need to know about this. Sure, you can attack for free if you have like 8 stadiums in the discard pile, but we're not doing that. That's not part of this deck, so don't worry about it. Anyways, it's really just a pivot. Radiant Venusaur, though, is the Radiant of choice in this deck. Not one that we've seen in top 8s at regionals. I think the only one of the OG Kanto trio now is Blastoise. I can't remember what that card does. But Venusaur, if you need a refresher on that card, it is a 150 HP basic grass Pokemon. It has the ability Sunny Bloom. At the end of your turn after your attack, you may use this ability. Draw cards until you have 4 cards in your hand. Combos really well with something like Peony. Right, Peony. There's 4 of them in this deck. It's a very, very strong card in here to be able to discard your hand and grab 2 trainer cards, whatever you want in there, especially because, you may have some Battle VIP Pass in your hand, considering this deck plays 4 of them. You may have them later and you just want to pitch them, right?
That's interesting. I don't know if I've seen this combo before. Maybe it's not new to some of our listeners, but like that's a cool little combo. Peony.
I think it's something that we may have talked about previously, but it's been a long time since we talked about
like... Peony Bidoof, right? That the Peony Bidoof combo is nice, but this is cool too. So I don't know.
I mean, we've already talked about the strength of just playing 1 Battle VIP Pass, right, with your supporter. Imagine grabbing 2 Battle VIP Pass,
right,
with your supporters. So,
well, the nice thing about it too is you can go search out your twin and your double turbos if you need them. You can search out things like Yellhorn or Rescue Carrier. I'm a little surprised that there's no Pal Pads in here.
That is kind of interesting, I would say. So I think if there's a card to add, it would be that.
Yeah, because there is something nice about... Because this, I will say, for any of the people listening and people watching, the whole point of this deck is you're, one, getting rid of all the special energy from all those decks that play it, and two, you're doing Durant's Devour, discarding, up to 4 cards.
Yeah, like once they can't attack anymore, just devour, 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 devour.
Yeah, and it's like, there are certain decks that are going to be easier or harder to play, but I think Silene would be good because with all the Yveltal and control on the other side of the board that you might face, having your own Silene to get those energy back and loop it, that way you can make sure that they mill out before you do, basically. So, I don't know.
It's interesting to see, especially a deck that is not aggressive, take 6 prize. It's always interesting to see the decks pop up and when they do and how they do against who they do. Sean, but I mean, that was Brisbane top 16, really, in a nutshell.
Just wild.
Just absolutely. Like, I remember because this was the first of the 3 regionals to finish that we'll talk about, and everybody was like, whoa, this is like a PTCGO tournament, like online tournament, like this is nuts.
Yeah, I mean, there's a small world, Jake, in which I think that it would not be crazy if either this or if there's any cards out there that just mill 2 cards off the top of the deck that are basics that use colorless energy, I could see something like Lugia starting to play those cards. Just because, as we see, like, Control, we'll see it in Toronto, but, like, is becoming much more popular.
You know what is really interesting about the Durant deck specifically? It doesn't play the Misfortune Sisters.
Right.
Which is a card that we'll talk about later, but if you do not know, Misfortune Sisters or whatever it's called, I think it's a Silver Tempest or the Astral Radiance. I think it's Astral Radiance. Supporter card. It looks at the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck and you discard any item cards that you see in there.
Yeah.
So interesting that it's not present in this Durant list, but I mean, you gotta.
Do you want to just jump to Sanders' deck right now and jump to Stuttgart? Go crazy.
Yeah, let's go crazy. We'll talk about this card in full swing. The Stuttgart Regional, 745 players. My favorite player in the whole world, Sander, went to LAIC playing a control deck, and all of a sudden at Stuttgart, a week later, played a completely different control deck and made top 8 again. I don't know how he does it. I literally think he's invincible. But Sean, this time at Stuttgart, he played Mewtwo v Union Kirlia is what we're going to call this deck. I think Limitless says Gengar, but I think Kirlia, in my opinion, is a little bit more important in this. If you do not know what I mean by Kirlia, because you're like, Kirlia, control, what on earth do you mean? There is a Ralts line in here, a 4-4-1 Ralts line, 4 Ralts, 4 Kirlia, 4 Gardevoir. The Ralts is just kind of a Pokemon that's there. Its attack is switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon, which could be good in conserving resources, because when you evolve into Kirlia, that is the main function of this evolution line. This 80 HP Psychic Stage 1 Pokemon, very easily searchable with Level Ball, Sean. And then also, anyways, it has this ability called Refinement. You've heard this ability before. We've seen it on bunches of other Pokemon. You may discard a card from your hand in order to use this ability. Once during your turn, you may draw 2 cards. So just like Trade, just like Cinccino, we got Trade, right? Yep. Zoroark GX, Cinccino, all of the goodies. In terms of draw engine, it's right there. And then you have another option, Gardevoir. I would assume that this is evolving to like avoid like Sableye or something like that. You know, Sableye or Cramorant can't one hit knock you out in terms of the damage, because Gardevoir, stage 2, 140 HP psychic Pokemon, It has the ability Shining Arcana. Once during your turn, you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck and attach any number of basic energy cards you find in there to your Pokemon in any way you'd like. Put the other cards in your hand. So it's a draw 2. You don't have to discard. But yeah, I mean, it's draw 2. And maybe that's what you do at the end of the game as well. I unfortunately did not get to see Sander play any of these games, and I haven't played this deck myself. So I don't know exactly like your end game sequence in terms of your loop and whatnot with the Mewtwo V Union, but it wouldn't surprise me if like at the end to conserve your discards, right? Because you know, the more that you discard, technically the less cards you have in your sequence. The Gardevoir can help you to where you just draw the 2 cards, right? That you Silene and put on top of the deck or something of the sort. So
I think you actually just nailed it on the head. Between Gardevoir and Pyukumuku, I think it's literally it's a 2-card draw.
Yeah.
And you know, especially once you have like 2 or 3 Kirlias out, you have so much discard draw. Sometimes you just need straight draw. You draw, then you can discard one of those in the late game, whatever. So, yeah. And then, like, yeah, between that and Snorlax, your draw engine to get you through those first 4 or 5 prizes is crazy.
Sean, we've talked about the Mewtwo V Union, and the reason we've talked about Sander and Mewtwo V Union, just healing, using Super Regeneration, the Psychic Colorless attack to heal 200 damage from this Pokemon, to basically heal off everything that attacks you in there. It's interesting though with the Gardevoir, because you are playing 4 Psychic Energy. I mentioned this to you before the podcast. You can actually use that because Gardevoir's ability says attach the energy that you find to your Pokemon in any way that you'd like. You can kind of power up this Mewtwo V Union so you don't have to use Union Gate right on it, which I don't know how many times you actually do that, but it's just an interesting little tidbit to think about. But Sean, what are some other little things in this that people may not know about preventing, or I guess negating, damage onto your Mewtwo V Union?
Well, he is playing the Life Shaker Gengar, which allows you as often as you like, you can move a damage counter from one of your Psychic to another on your turn. I think that is partially because Mewtwo V Union is 310 HP. You can heal 200. I would imagine that this is to prevent certain decks that have the ability to do maybe more damage, but not enough to knock you out.
Lugia does what? 280 base, or it does 220 base?
Yeah.
But still, like, I mean, they play powerful energies and things like that, so they're doing more, and, you know, Radiant Charizard is a thing.
So if you can, okay, cool, you're fine. You just, you know, you move some damage counters around, and what you do, play a Scoop Up Net, pick up all those damage counters on one of your Kirlias, and then you're fine, right? So I think that's a really interesting, like, little workaround. You've also got the Radiant Serena, which allows you to heal 20 damage from each of your Pokemon. So you can spread all that damage out. So actually, I'm just realizing this. You can move those damage counters to a bunch of Pokemon, Radiant Serena, heal 20 from each of them, and effectively heal, like, you know, if it's all Psychic except for the Radiant Serena, 100 damage on top of healing 200 damage, which is stupid. It's absolutely dumb.
Absolutely nuts, because if you do not remember, Mewtwo V Union in the past of Sander played like Cook or Pokemon Center Lady as a supporter, but now with this Radiant Serena Gengar combo, you can effectively negate that supporter, and you can continuously keep using things like Silene, Flannery as well. There's a Flannery in this list to be able to take away stadium cards and special energies on the board to prevent your opponent from doing things in the game.
Yep.
So just really, really cool deck, in my opinion. It's insane to me that somebody took this Gardevoir line and threw it in. But Sean, what do you got showing up right there?
I mean, I pulled up one card. I think this has got to be for the Mew VMAX matchup. Because for those of you who don't maybe realize, Mew VMAX only plays usually 4 energy these days. 4 double turbos, that's it. So, how do you beat Mew VMAX in the slowest way possible? You just put one Shadow Rider Calyrex V out in front. You Scoop Up Net everything else. you attach 1 psychic energy and you Shadow Mist for 50 minutes, which is during your opponent's next turn, they can't play any special energy or stadium cards from their hand.
It can prevent a lot of people from being able to do anything in their turns. And Mew, though, has taken a little bit of a shakeup in terms of how it does it. I don't know if it's in response to this because it was in the same exact tournament. Brett Koosmans from Belgium got second place with Mew VMAX, playing 4 Fusion Strike energy, playing the Fusion Strike Alyssa Sparkle version of this deck. Going back, most of the Mew decks, as you were saying, Sean, are playing like the double, just straight up double turbo and bing, bang, boom. But this list specifically, Brent was playing with the Fusion Strike energies and Meloetta, back to the turbo days that we saw of old when Azul absolutely cracked Mew VMAX for a time being.
That's cool. That's really interesting. I mean, obviously the Europeans will be playtesting with each other. So it may be that, like, if Sander is going to the tournament and he's going to try to tech for this, like, hey, let's mix it up, go back to the Elisa Sparkle version, and, maybe that is... Now, how many people are going to be playing that Shadow Rider Calyrex V? Probably not that many, but still.
It's still... And, I mean, theoretically, Stuttgart, you probably heard at least some news of Brisbane before you entered your list. So it could be entirely possible. I don't actually know that for sure, but it could be entirely possible that, Brent and whoever Brent was testing with and stuff, maybe heard from Brisbane, like, oh my gosh, there's all these whack decks in this regional, like, this, that, and the other. And they're like, we need to go back to the Fusion Strike energies.
Yeah. And then go back to like being able to search out energy that way. So if you're gonna get Eveltalled, just search for one. You do Elisa Sparkle, get it in there, and then it'll go away. But eventually they'll run out of Eveltalls, right?
Exactly. So very, very crazy. Along with the winning list, Sean, of Stuttgart Regionals. I don't know how to say this person's name. I'm so sorry. They're from Poland. Mateusz Laskusik. I'm so unbelievably sorry about not being able to say your name. I'm just a silly, dumb, stupid American. But anyway, Sean, this deck is correct. Palkia, Origin Form Palkia V-Star. Vikavolt is the deck. I think we've kind of talked about this deck before, maybe like a couple weeks ago. It didn't make top 8, but I think it appeared at like a regional and did really well. And so we talked about it for a little bit. But this is playing the Celebrations Mysterious Tail Mew as your draw engine. Mew shoes, right? Turbo shoes, 4 Mews, 4 trekking shoes in here. You've got your Vikavolt, you've got your Radiant Greninja, lots of draw and stall in here with your speed energies and Melanies, right? To be able to power up the Vikavolt and its Paralyzing Bolt. If you do not remember, Paralyzing Bolt is Vikavolt's attack. Lightning Energy, colorless, costs 50 damage. During your opponent's next turn, they can't play any item cards from their hand. So really, really good, especially when you're hitting for weakness into Lugia, right? Yep. Can't let them play item cards to discard their Archeops. They got to do it on like a Research or a Serena or something like that. And just really, really good. Again, slowing down the game, letting you set up, preventing them from setting up. Again, really, really cool list.
Yeah, I really like this list. Is really neat. I think if you can get this off turn 1 going second, like if you play that Melanie, which there are 4 of these in the deck with Vikavolt, really slow things down. So Vikavolt really good against Lost Box as well. Good against Archeops because, to your point, right? If they have a slow turn 1 and they haven't been able to Ultra Ball all those Archeops into the discard, well, I'm going to hit you for 100 damage because of weakness, and you won't be able to get any Archeops in the discard for a few turns. So,
and I mean, think about it going second, right? Let's say you're going second with this list. Lugia players turn 1, right? They can't use the supporters. So more often than not, we saw this many times on streams, the Lugia could maybe get 1, right? More often than not, it would just be 1 Archeops in the discard on turn 1 with no supporter. in your first turn going second with this deck, you could 100% Vikavolt Melanie into Paralyzing Bolt right away, because not only, right, do you have your attachment of the lightning energy, you've got some energy searches in there, some trekking shoes and Muse to dig, but Luminion, right? Luminion can 100% grab you that Melanie to be able to pretty much guarantee it. You know, it's just really consistent, really strong, really cool as well. And then also there's Palkia, Origin Form Palkia in there, you know, Subspace Swell. Just a really good attack.
Yeah, I really like this list. It seems like a good response to the way a lot of the meta was going. Also, like not having to rely so heavily on special energies is big, because then, like, yeah, all those Yveltal lists that, you know, were popular at NAIC and had become popular. Now you're like, I'm playing basics. So now you have to flip Crushing Hammers, but you're not going to be able to flip Crushing Hammers if you're Paralyzing Bolted. So
yeah, and
GG's.
also, even if you do, right, there's plenty of
Portal.
other options to get those energies back with like Melanie and stuff. So it's really nuts how this list, you know, you don't have too many counters except for all the other lightning decks that are suddenly appearing.
Yeah.
And you know, all those counters, your Palkia is a sit and duck. But nobody's playing fighting, so your Vikavolt is free.
That's true. Ain't nobody playing fighting.
When's
Jake,
the next time we'll see fighting, Sean?
fighting is always one of the types, man, that I can't remember the last time there was like a really good fighting deck, but I digress.
I mean, it would be Urshifu. That would be it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Rapid Strike, yeah.
But it's hard to even think about Urshifu as a fighting type Pokemon.
Yeah, because it happened to be, but it was like never. Yeah, anyways. Do you want to go to Toronto Regional to wrap things up?
Toronto Regionals, over 1,000 players. 1,061 players in this regional. There was a lot, but only one person rose above them all. Piper Lapine winning her second regional of the season. Absolutely nuts. And I think out of the there are only a few players that have actually been active, or I'm sorry, there are only two, or I'm sorry, let me bring it back. Tay Widesoul did a lot of research over on Twitter, and there have been very few players that have won 2 major events in the same season. And especially because there's still more season to go, there are only even fewer players that have won 3 in the same season, with Piper playing a bunch of different decks right now. This winning list being Mewtwo V Union, Yveltal, one that we've seen kind of before, but a little bit different. And we'll talk about that here in a second. Just really, really insane, Sean. She's been playing out of her mind lately.
Yeah, I will say it's pretty wild that technically Piper has won 2 regionals and does not yet qualify for a Worlds invite.
That's a whole other conversation that I mean, with the point system that I'm not.
You don't want to get into.
For.
I'm just gonna say.
Talk to someone else that like knows the point systems like the back of their head, who's been playing a long time, who is actually going for a Worlds invite, but. Oh, not me. Not me.
The only reason I mentioned it is because it's a wild thought. I have no doubt in my mind Piper will qualify for Worlds before the end of the year, but it is a pretty absurd concept just on the surface. But anyways, Jake, how is this control, like, what does this control do differently or similarly to maybe Sander or some of the others that we're seeing?
This is the same sort of concept with the Mewtwo V Union as we talked about with Sander, using super regeneration to be able to heal off 200 damage and to do a lot of preventing and cleaning off. You've got other cards. You don't have the Radiant Serena in this list. You have Radiant Gardevoir. Radiant Gardevoir, basic Radiant Pokemon, 130 HP Psychic, Loving Veil. All of your Pokemon take 20 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon V, which newsflash, majority of the format are Pokemon Vs. You've also got a V-Guard energy in there to prevent some damage. V-Guard energy, 30 less damage from attacks of your opponent's Pokemon V. So that's preventing 50 in general, which is a good chunk of the damage. I mentioned earlier, healing supporters. There's a Pokemon Center lady in here to heal off even more damage. That's, oh gosh, 200. You're preventing 50 on top of that, and then 60 damage for the Pokemon Center lady. It's effectively 310 HP, which is the entire Mewtwo VMAX, essentially. So, I mean, you're cleaning off all of the damage.
Yeah, I will say, Jake, the combo that Piper actually got into in the finals, did you get a chance to watch that one as well?
I did kind of watch it. I was doing a little bit of work, but I watched it. Yeah.
So the little combo at the end there is, I think Lugia. It was against Lugia, right?
No. Arc Duraludon.
Oh, Duraludon, right. Still, same amount of damage output, which is 220, right? Mm-hmm. And so anything that's dealing 220 damage, the way that the math works is you just say, like, okay, you hit me, you leave 20 damage. You hit me again, now there's 40 damage. You hit me again, and you heal with Mewtwo V Union. There then would be like 60 damage, and then you're kind of in this territory of like, oh, it's one Leon away from knocking out Mewtwo V Union. No. Then you Pokemon Center lady, heal all that 60 off, start the loop again, and then you just, Silene and Palpad your way into that loop forever.
You know how insane this format would be for these Mewtwo V Union decks if Lieutenant Surge's strategy was legal?
Oh my gosh.
For those of you that don't remember, this was a Sun and Moon card that was a staple in pretty much all single prize decks, I feel like. I feel like
mostly control
mainly
and
control.
Mill. Yeah.
Mainly control and mill, but like pretty much every single prize deck played at least one. It allowed you, if you were down on prizes, so let's say Sean and I are playing, he's got 5 prizes left to take, I have 6 left to take. I can play 2 supporters in a turn alongside my Lieutenant Surge, effectively playing 3 supporters in a turn. You can play Surge and then 2 others on top of that, but you have to play Surge first before you play any of the other supporters. So just an absolutely cracked card, and I'm thinking about how insane it would be in this format with Team Yell's Cheer, right, Silene, Misfortune Sisters, just absolutely crazy. The Misfortune Sisters were in this deck. I mentioned this card earlier. Look at the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck and discard any number of item cards you find in there. Your opponent shuffles the other cards back into their deck. And with items being such a heavy influence in this format, we talked about the Vikavolt earlier, another item locking card. Misfortune Sisters getting some airtime in regionals.
Yeah, you think about too, like, this deck likes to draw a lot of cards. This deck has to flip some heads on Silene in order not to deck yourself out. But Misfortune Sisters, if you think about that in combination with things like Team Yellhorn, which confuses both active and Galar Mine, what you can do is late in the game, you can, strand Pokemon in the active, confuse them with Galar, that and Galar Mine. Then Misfortune Sister and hopefully start to hit any if they have any switching cards, right? Against Lost Box, it's super devastating because that goes like your escape ropes, your scoop up nets, all of that. It's just, it's. I saw one Misfortune Sister that she played and it hit 4 out of 5 were item cards, and it was just devastating.
Yeah. It's just an absolutely destructive card. You're playing 4 Snorlax. Gormandize as your starter because Gormandize Snorlax is so good. Just look at anything Tropical Beach related. You've got the 4 Yveltal Cry of Destruction. This has been a staple for Sander and control decks, and for good reason on top of that. You play a Milk Tank in case the opponent doesn't have any of the what's that attack? The Shred, where you go through all effects, no Mews, no Duraludons, things like that. If they don't have an answer to it, you just Milk Tank pass, or route. You route as well on top of that. Maybe take some prizes, but very, very cool in this list. Kind of talked about it before because I feel like this is pretty similar to Sander's list of the Mewtwo V Union when that first popped up.
Yeah.
But I think not exactly the same, a little bit different, but
I would say the main differences between that and that list and this list is probably Sydney, Misfortune Sister, Pokemon Lady. So like that little trio
Yeah,
there.
and like maybe I think Lost Vacuum too being in there.
Yeah.
Lost Vacuum really helping you out to get rid of something like I think I saw Piper use it on the Arc Duraludon with the umbrella. What's that called? I'm
Oh, the
forgetting the
big
name of it.
parasol.
Yeah, Big Parasol. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
Because Yveltal can't go through that.
That's true. That's true. So yeah,
Absolutely insane on that one. Sean, we got some other decks in here that we got to talk about. I want to talk about the Lost Box counter deck that popped up. Caleb Gettimer getting 3rd. The same list as Grant Manley getting 7th. And then also Danny Altavilla and Azul GG, Azul Garcia Griego, all in day 2. I remember there was one moment where all 4 of those guys, they're all in the same testing group. They all play the same deck. They're all buddies. I remember all 4 of them were like table 4 and 5. This was like for the winning in almost. Yeah. I think this was for the winning in. Table 4 and 5. 4 players, all 4 of those guys playing the same deck, 2 mirrors for winning ins. And I think Azul conceded to Caleb because Azul, I think, pretty much already has his invite now. So just try to get Caleb a little bit more points. I believe. I don't know that for sure. That's what I would assume. And then I don't know if Grant and Danny played it out, but Grant ended up being the winner, getting 7th in the tournament. But this is kind of an interesting twist on the Lost Box deck. Moving away, Sean, from the Radiant Charizard and adding 2 other funny looking cards in there. One of them we've already talked about, Sean. What is it?
It is the Zekrom. The Zekrom that can absolutely devastate the Lugia.
Exactly. Paralysis, knockouts, you name it, it's there. But there's also another card in there. This was the headliner one that I think Azul said he's playing a meme at the regional, and he's, all 4 of the guys get like top 50, at this 1,000 plus player tournament playing this meme card. It is Kyogre Celebrations.
Yeah.
Sean, I remember when this deck littered ladder, the 40 energy Kyogre Volcarona V deck that Andrew Hone played on Tricky Gym, and I hated every moment of my life when this deck was all over ladder because it was so cheap to play. But this basic 130 HP water Pokemon Kyogre, if you do not know, has a really cool first attack called Aqua Storm, water, colorless. Discard the top 5 cards of your deck, then choose 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. This attack does 50 damage for each energy card you discarded in this way to each of those Pokemon. So, you could do up to 250 damage to 2 bench Pokemon. And with something like Oranguru, right? Primate Wisdom Oranguru in this list, I don't think you ever play Kyogre to try to hit 5 energy cards. Sure, that would be very, very cool, but I think the point of the Kyogre is to finish off Pokemon that run away on the bench, or maybe to hit, small squishier Pokemon like other Comfeys, Sableyes. What's some other Pokemon that we saw?
I will say, actually, you can use it at the end of the game because we do see that there is Energy Recycler in the list.
Oh yeah, that and Ordinary Rod in there.
So the benefit of those, if you can plan your game out and hold on to those resources, the benefit of that is you can wait till the end of the game. Just Energy Recycler, I saw somebody go through their whole deck and then Energy Recycler just those 5 cards back. So it is going to be a 5-card thing, but the game is over after that. So you're not going to have to draw.
That's kind of like your finishing move.
Yes. So that's a good way. If you think about it, if you can either set up damage with Sableye, or you just knock out 2 Genesects, right, on the bench, take 4 prizes all at once, and then you're good to go. You're done.
Especially because we talked about in the Lightning Counterbox deck, the different addition to the damage of Zekrom. This deck doesn't have it. It's going to do 260, and I guess it could do Choice Belt for a knockout, really. But still, like, you could do 260 and then snipe it out later with the Sableye or what have you.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think that's the main differences with this Lost Box deck. You are playing Mirage Gates because of Zekrom and Kyogre's attack costs being 3 energy, 2 of which have to be a specific color.
You're also playing it for that Snorlax. Snorlax, you know, 3 energies, thumping Snore, 180 damage. 180 is not something to sneeze at for that guy right there. But
yeah, I did
see kind of a pretty good attacker.
I don't know if it was Caleb or maybe Alex Schmansky. Somebody was playing the Snorlax, and they had to flip both heads this weekend in order to win that match. And you know, it was like he flipped both heads, and everybody's like, "Okay, fine, you got me. Game over."
If you don't know the heads that Sean's referring to, it is Snorlax when it uses the thumping Snore attack. Snorlax falls asleep, and then you have to flip 2 coins instead of 1 during the checkup phase to wake up. And if either of them are tails, Snorlax stays asleep. So, again, you know, hitting the 2 heads, you got to do it to wake back up, buddy.
But yeah, Jake, I think that is just about it. In second place, we don't have the deck list, but it was Arceus Duraludon VMAX.
Yeah, so I mean, with Mewtwo Control and Arceus Duraludon, not a finals that we really expected.
No, definitely not.
I would say.
I will say, Christian, I think, played as best he could. He did not have the best starts in either of the games.
I think that's a hard matchup, though. Yeah. I think that's heavily... When I was watching it, I felt like... I mean, Piper's really good, and Piper probably prepared for the matchup, but, like, I just feel like that is 100% Mewtwo almost.
I will say with Mewtwo Control especially, it is the most... Like, if you don't really know what that deck does and how it works, it can be the most misleading deck ever, because when even me watching it knowing what the eventual outcome is meant to be, I'm just sitting there like, well, maybe if they can do this and maybe if they can do that before Piper gets the pieces in the discard. And it's like, they always are going to find the cards to get it in the discard. And right when you think, oh, if they only had one more turn, it's like, it was never going to be one more turn. Like, they were going to get the cards into the discard, Mewtwo comes out, and then it's game over. The second Mewtwo comes out, basically it's game over.
It's an absolutely crazy list to pilot, and a lot of control decks are like that, to where it's you know, like a surprise almost, or you know, you never know what's going to happen next, and that's how a lot of them do so well, is because people just are super unprepared for it, especially in day one.
Jake, can I say what I think somebody might need to play as a response to control?
Oh, what?
That was such an like.
I like control.
Oh, I love control.
I think it's fascinating.
Oh no, it is. I don't have anything
to counter. No need to counter.
I only mention this because like there have been cards. I don't know if there are any that are currently standard legal, but there have been cards where it's usually on Pidgeotos, and they're cards that have you shuffle their opponent's active Pokemon and all cards attached to it back into the deck. And I'm like,
I think there was a Pidgeot like that.
Yeah, I'm like, I feel like that card probably exists in standard somewhere. I don't know what it is. Listeners, hit us up on Twitter if that card does exist.
We'll find it and play it and tell us how it goes.
Yeah, because like, look, it might be absolutely terrible, but I'm thinking like in a Lugia deck too, where you have all of this colorless energy with like, because usually those attack costs are like 2 colorless or 3 colorless. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm just saying, Jake, if that card exists, that's a pretty great counter to a Mewtwo in the front.
There's a crazy Mewtwo, or maybe not Mewtwo. I don't know. This person lost to Mewtwo. There's one more deck that I want to talk about. It's not in this top 8, but it's Michael Catron went 10-3-2 at Toronto, playing Arceus V-Star. A card, by the way, Arceus V-Star, we have seen super decline with the rise of Lugia and Giratina even for a time being. So they're just absolutely insane how that card has dropped. But doing well with Espeon VMAX and Aerodactyl V-Star. 2 cards, Sean, that I don't think you would have guessed that would have done 10, 3, and 2 in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Aerodactyl being like, if I go first and I can get the Aerodactyl out and use the ability, then yeah, goodbye.
Yeah, just use your V-Star power. If you do not remember, Aerodactyl V-Star's V-Star power, when used, it's an attack. It costs 1 colorless energy. When you use it, it takes away all abilities as long as that Pokemon is in the field of play. If you listened to several podcasts ago when we talked about this card first being revealed, I lost my mind about how insane this card interaction was. But as long as that Aerodactyl was on the field, I think it was all other abilities besides the Ancient Star ability, which is the ability that Aerodactyl V-Star gains when it uses its V-Star power, are active. So you prevent all of these Pokemon with abilities, and including Lugia V-Star, to be able to get those Archeops out. And if Lugia V-Star can't get those Archeops out, they just lose. Yeah. Right? Like manual attaching, real bad for Lugia. So this was I just love that Aerodactyl V-Star got its like bit of fame in this, especially with the Arceus. But Sean, do you remember what Espeon VMAX does?
Let me look it up. Espeon V... No, I don't. That's the answer to that.
Espeon VMAX is in Evolving Skies, if you do not remember. It has the ability, well, I guess I should say first, 310 HP VMAX Pokemon, Psychic, so same as Mewtwo. It has the ability Solar Revelation, prevent all effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to all of your Pokemon that have energy attached. So effects of attacks, that includes Sableye, right? Because Sableye placing damage counters is an effect of an attack. And so if you just put a bunch of energies places, which by the way, Arceus is really good at just putting energies in a bunch of different places, you can prevent pretty much any damage.
Yeah.
At least a lot of the spread type stuff that we've seen in like Lost Box and things like that.
It also is a good response to the amazing rare Yveltal.
Yep.
And also
amazing rare Yveltal, also the Cry of Destruction.
Yep.
Yeah. Even though you're playing some double turbos and captures, and you've got kind of an even split between basic energy and special energies, but
still.
Yeah, still.
Yeah, and so like if they have any amount of energy, like it is definitely a really interesting card.
There's just, if you want to pick up a new deck, right? If you're tired of the format, I know a lot of people have been saying that this Lugia format has not been super fun, right? I don't really know. I haven't really been playing too much, and I've enjoyed seeing some of the decks that pop up. But if you want a new deck that's not named Lugia and you want a cheap deck as well, there's a lot of different decks that you can play at your locals, at online tournaments. The Arlington Regionals, that's in 2 weeks, right? So
yeah,
very, very cool. A lot of the stuff that you can do. And you can go check that out at limitless.com. It is, let me get the exact, limitlesstcg.com is the exact website. That is where you should go to get deck lists. That's where we were showing all the results on the video version. If you saw on this podcast, that's where we see all the list winners. You can look at previous years as well if you want to, but that's where we Limitless does phenomenal things. So especially for the history of the Pokemon trading card game. So go support them. And Sean, is that all that we have to talk about today?
Yeah. That's it.
Still not playing Pokemon TCG Live? Still sucks.
No, yeah, still not on that game. But, the format, it's not nearly as bad as, like you said, not nearly as bad as everybody was expecting. Lots of cool counter stuff. And, yeah, we'll see.
It'll be interesting because I feel like this meta currently is like Lugia and Lugia counters.
Yeah.
Which I don't really know how I feel in terms of like, is this a good format? Is this a bad format? Because I'm not like actively playing it per se. I'm more like just watching.
It's a format where Control just won a regional. So
yeah,
for
I mean, it can't be that bad, right?
I'm like, this has got to be great for you. Just that's the perspective that you need.
I'm living the dream right now. And you know what? It's been great living this podcast of the Menopause Podcast. That's all we got for you today. Signing off, the podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. See you later.